Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Main Street Finance Podcast. I am, of course, Alex, your host, and this week I have for you an interview that I have been looking forward to for months. Ian from the Best Film Ever podcast comes on the show to talk to us about the economics of the film industry. Now, of course, I love any and all opportunities to mix my two favorite things, finance, or, just money, and movies. So my M&Ms, so to say, money and movies. For those of you that don't know, Best Film Ever is one of my favorite podcasts of all time. And yes, I am saying that while Ian is watching me say this introduction. So happy to know I'm flattering him just a little bit, puff up that ego. Remember, hashtag Ian is always right. So much like myself, Ian is a professional in the field and he likes to be a little bit private. So we're just going to be referring to him as Ian. And his background is he is a film studies professor at a university in the UK. So with that, let's go ahead and bring him onto the show. Ian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much. Long time coming. I think we were in communication with this a long time ago, and then life does what it does, and you kind of forget things. And actually, I don't know if there's a more fitting time than what's going on right now to discuss what we're talking about, because we are in a season of change. We are in a season of change in the film industry and what it could mean going forward. So a very good time, and big fan of the Main Street Finance podcast, and just fan of yours in general, Alex. So I've been looking forward to this conversation myself. And although it is stupid o'clock here in the UK, we're recording just past 10 p.m. I am up. I am ready to go. I have beverages by my side and ready to chat a little bit of movies and a little bit of money.
Oh, yeah, we're absolutely ready to go. As Jeff Goldblum would say, even though life tried to keep us apart, life finds a way.
Must go faster, must go faster.
Absolutely. So, Ian, I wanted to bring you onto the show, A, because I just wanted an excuse to bring you onto the show.
Hey,
but B, we have you here because I wanted to learn more about how the movie industry works. I know a little bit. I have some frameworks of maybe if there's a book, a producer has to go find somebody, buy the rights, go to somebody, hey, give me $100 million so I can turn this book into a movie, which will hopefully make you a ton of money. But I really don't understand the relationships between producers, the studios, the theaters. So I went ahead and, using the excuse of bringing Ian on the show, we have him here to explain how all these work, all the puzzle pieces. So he is just going to chug this beer and give it to us straight.
All right. It's definitely not a a streamlined, easy answer on this one, and it's changed at various points. I think you have to kind of know where we've come from to know where we are and to know where we're going, because the easy answer is that there is no easy answer. And depending on the situation, it's very, very, very different. So if I may, I guess class is kind of in session. I'm going to go through some sort of concepts to do with the filmmaking industry, and it might shed a light on parts of what we're talking about here. I think to start off with, we need to know that for the most part, films consist of three major cycles of development, or three major cycles in the life cycle of a film. The first is production, and that is everything up until the film is finished being shot. That includes script writing, that includes your carpenters, that includes pitching in the room, all those things, the production sort of cycle. The next part is your distribution, which is just getting the film to the cinemas. Not the act of showing it yet, but getting the film to the cinemas, and that also includes the marketing of the film. That is done by the distributor, what is more commonly referred to as the studio, more often than not. The third part is your exhibition cycle, and that's for the most part going to be your cinemas, as we would say in this country, your theaters, as you might say over in North America, as well as then later, opportunities for secondary viewings on various platforms, whether they be television or cloud-based. And that's basically how that sort of thing goes. And back in the day, when we first started film, when film was first developing, kind of studios would do all three elements at once. They would sort of fund their own script writing. They would film the films. They would go ahead, produce the film reels, ship them all over so we could project them. And they would even run the cinema houses themselves. And this is called vertical integration, when you own all elements of the supply chain, so to speak. It'd be no different than if you and I opened a pizza restaurant and we managed to buy out the dough maker, the cheese manufacturer, and then we ended up owning the final restaurant that serves the pie. It's the same idea. If you own all the pieces within the chain, the money, although it's moving around, never leaves where you are. So theoretically, the greatest chance for profit. And this is also built around a time when we have the Hollywood star system starts to be created, which the idea being, it doesn't really matter what the story is. What matters is who's in it. So sort of a modern day reference might be, back when Leo DiCaprio finished Titanic and he was the biggest movie star on the planet, you put Leo's face on anything and people went to go see it. They went nuts for it. Even that, what was that film called? Propaganda, I want to think it was called. It was a terrible film. But the idea that it was Leo drew people to the cinema much more than the idea of what it was. It was just who's in it. Meg Ryan and Matthew McConaughey made a career out of this in rom-coms for the longest time. And so we can sort of see how that takes place in a modern frame. But back in the day, it was even more important because actors and actresses signed exclusive contracts with studios. They became what were known as contract players. And so every studio had their roster, just like a sports team. And the idea being, depending on who was making the film, if you got the rights to King Kong, depending on which studio it went to, it would depend on who was going to play those roles. But pretty much you could call who was going to play those roles, just depending on where those rights ended up. And then what happens is someone kind of takes a look at it and goes, well, hang on, if you and I have our own little independent film studio, Alex, and we're trying to make a film, the problem is if the big five studios, who at the time were Paramount, 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, RKO, and MGM, if they own the cinemas, well, then who's going to show our movie?
Where are you going to go?
Where are you going to go? And especially in a world like in the 40s and the 50s, you can't build an independent, if I were to get my movie made, I'm not going to build the cinema to get it shown. I mean, if I had that sort of situation, I wouldn't be an independent filmmaker, I suppose. And so it sort of, draws the
sort of
ire.
Like a monopoly.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And so we get this antitrust piece of legislation, sometimes called the Paramount Court Case, sometimes called the Paramount Decree, technically called United States versus Paramount Pictures Incorporated. And the idea being that you guys have rigged the system so that no one else can get in. So it's might not be a monopoly per se, but it's definitely, what's it called when it's a small, is it an oligopoly when it's a small amount of players?
Oligopoly is when there's between like 3 and 5.
Yeah, it's kind of what we have here. Is we have basically an oligopoly happening here, where if you're not one of these big five players, you can't get in. So they outlaw, they say you can't control all three anymore. And they all basically go, fine, we won't do the exhibition. We'll open that up. And generally what this does is it starts to shift a little bit where, Universal, United Artists, Columbia, they start to get a foothold in. And you start to see films at the same time the contract player starts to sort of dissipate a little bit. So you start to see things like Some Like It Hot, where Marilyn Monroe and Tony Curtis, who were signed to, what were they signed to? Tony Curtis was Universal, but he got to do a United Artists film. Marilyn Monroe was 20th Century Fox. She got to do a United Artists film. And we start to see other people sort of elbow their way in. And for the most part, this gets us through to, this is the building block for what we kind of have as our mainstream film financing process. And the studio sort of starts to decrease in power just a little bit, and the creative figures, the directors, start to increase in power. And so this is kind of the theory what we sort of have, which more likely than not looks like a producer comes across some rights, whether he has found a script that someone else has written and purchased the rights to make this film, or if there's a piece of already existing intellectual property, which he wants to manifest into a film. And then they approach studios who then bid on the rights. So he's got the rights, and then he finds a studio who will fund the project. Now, we'd like to believe they just go in and there's these giant vaults of money and they go, yes, $30 million, $50 million, $200 million, here you go. And for the most part, it's much more like I imagine trying to acquire any sort of credit than it is anything else. It's how do we finance this? And we have many partners in the capacity, even all the way through to today. And a big sort of or a primary focus of funding is generally slate financing, is more often than not the answer of the day, where you've got financiers who will sort of finance a cross-section of films to diversify, if you will, to reduce the risk.
So it's a syndicate.
In a manner of speaking, I suppose so, yeah.
Well, in banking, that's what it's called. Like if you have a company like Coca-Cola wants $100 million, there's not going to be any one bank that wants to give them $100 million. So what they'll do is, say they go to Bank of America. Bank of America will go to Chase and say, hey, we want to do this $100 million deal. However, we don't want to do all of it. So do you want a third? How big of a piece do you want? And then they'll form what's known as a syndicate, where they bring in a bunch of different banks to finance the full 100 million. It sounds about the same.
This sounds about right. So when you go ahead and you watch a film and you go, why are there 3 or 4 or 5 identification cards at the start of this film? It's because, yeah, these are all the parties who have sort of gone ahead and thrown some money into the pot, getting their sort of claim at the start. And they'll have all arranged deals for exactly how much or how they're going to be repaid, under the umbrella of the studio, of our distributor. And so, for instance, Jurassic Park, 4 studios bid Michael Crichton for the rights to Jurassic Park before the book was even finished. And Spielberg came in with a backing, he had Universal Pictures backing him on his bid, but it bid $1.5 million before the book had even been finished. Now, $1.5 million, knowing what we know, sounds like an absolute steal. But of course, at the time, an unfinished book, just on the idea it's dinosaurs that come to life. I mean, I guess $1.5 million could have sounded like a much larger number, knowing, I guess, if you were in the dark about how it eventually sort of becomes. And then you negotiate a budget for how the film is going to be used. We talked about this a little bit. And of course, the bigger the budget, the more control the studio is going to want over the creative process or even how the money's being spent. And so the filmmaker Kevin Smith, are you familiar with Kevin Smith?
Oh, I love Kevin Smith.
I thought you would. So Silent Bob himself, Kevin Smith, he famously went, look, Miramax loves me because they know they're going to give me $35 million, give or take. I'm going to make a profit of about $15-20 million. That's really all it's going to be. But I'm a safe bet. I'm not going in there asking them for $200 million. So they know what they're going to get. They're going to Kevin Smith film. The same people who see my films will go see the film. And this will be the end result. And as a result, they're kind of hands off because it's very low risk. Worst case scenario in a Kevin Smith film, you're going to lose $5-10 million in the grand scheme of things. That's the worst case scenario. It's not John Carter. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars on this thing. Now, when you get up to those mega budgets, the 200 million plus stuff like that, then you have a lot more studio interference because they want to and input because they're going to have an opinion on how to reduce the risk of the film going forward. Another step into this at this point, and even still to today to a degree, is the distribution. Now, keep in mind, up until the very recent time, as far as the history of film goes, when you made a film, you made them on film reels. And those things aren't cheap to make. I mean, each film would be 2 to 3 heavy reels of film minimum. And they'd charge about $4,000 to $8,000, depending on when you were making this and sort of what the rate is at a time. And then not only just to make those, you have to ship those. And these things are heavy. And so then you have to go ahead and get those across. Now, today, we're used to movies opening at the same time everywhere. But back before basically 2010, maybe, this isn't really the case because it doesn't make any sense for me to print a world's worth of film reels. That's not practical. We'll go ahead. I'll send them out. We'll use them once or twice or 3, for a month, 2 months, whatever it is. And then I've just wasted all of this. We got to chuck them all out. So what you would do is you would make a fraction of them and you would make sure the film played in your major centers in the United States first. And then you would go ahead and make sure that those then got played to the secondary markets in the US and into Canada. And then before that, you go to Europe and the rest of the world. Now, this is a physical property, though, as well. So as these things keep getting screened, the quality of the image and the quality of the sound starts to degrade. I wouldn't want to be in some of these like outer territories when the film finally made it to them. But if you're looking at old sort of release dates and going, why was there always this giant gap? Well, it's because, A, it was a physical product and it was just cost effective to do this. And secondly, this is a world before the internet. No one's going to tell you how Endgame finishes back in the day because there's no way of you to know, unless you happen to be traveling overseas and run into someone. There was no danger of that. But as a result, then it meant that who had the advantage? Again, it's your major Hollywood players who could afford. I mean, that initial outpouring of how many millions of dollars it is to print all those reels and to ship all those reels. I mean, that's going to have a direct correlation with financial success because it gets your foot in the door. A limited release versus a wide release, and then an international release. And what does that mean? So there's more or less sort of that. And they also pay for the marketing of the film. And this is not included in the budget. So if you go on and you look up what's the budget for your favorite film, this does not include marketing. And marketing generally can run anywhere from between, on the low end, 50, 75%. On the high end, 150 or 200% of the film's budget can then again be attributed. So if, as a rough rule of thumb, if we kind of say, whatever a film's budget is, it then gets doubled in a sense by marketing. And back in the day, it would have been radio spots and newspaper ads and billboards and TV spots. And as we get, further along, then we get to elements such as
YouTube ads, Facebook
ads, and getting yourself linked to highly viewed videos on that side, and making sure you're on that level, as well as then if we talk about marketing that goes more guerrilla like the things you might do at Comic-Con or the big sort of public spectacles that you might do. These things all require a fair amount of cash, which is part of the problem with James Bond and No Time to Die currently, is how many times can you delay this? How many times can you promote this? Because I'm going to give you some figures later, but I'm going to assume is 100% of the budget is marketing, but I think it's far higher than that. But,
well, especially if you got to do it twice.
They basically marketed the film 3 times over now. And so where do you go from that? But then on the flip side, are you going to get your money on the back end? So the benefit of now, though, in the internet era, is that we do get blanket distribution because all we do is upload the movie to a server. Everybody downloads the movie onto their local sort of hard drives at the relative cinemas. And because we all have digital projection systems, they all go ahead and play as such.
No more 600 pounds of Avatar flying around the country.
Yeah, and if you're Australia, you don't have to wait 1.5 years to get the film. You're right there with everybody else. And so the thing is, these films now, though, can be global events. And who does that play to again? The big conglomerates who can make the most noise at the greatest amount of time, because everybody wants to be in now on the global event. So, you would think that the digitization should be the great equalizer of film. You should think this should be the thing that makes independent filmmakers get their foot in the door. Because I have a Canon DSLR, I have Sony Vegas Pro, and I have Adobe After Effects and all these sorts of programs, and I have a broadband connection. Theoretically, there's no reason why I can't make a film and get it onto a major streaming platform, or even, submit it to studios for distribution. And so theoretically, there should be the great foot that lets the little guy get his foot in the door. I no longer have to make big physical reels. All I have to do is create one copy of the film that can then be copied and copied and copied digitally, and sort of removes that middleman process. But we'll take a look at if that's actually how things end up on the back end of all this. And then we get to the exhibition. And the problem is, for the longest time, it was great. You can do the film digitally, but we need to make sure that we can show the film digitally in all these places, or you're still actually having to print some reels. How long does that take? And also, we also have to consider that the cinema, the theater, they have to pay their employees. They have to get their cut. They're not doing this for free. So when you see a movie gets made for $100 million and you go, well, it took $100 million at the box office, it broke even. No, because about half of that, roughly, about half of that goes to the exhibitor. Half of that goes to, in this country, Cineworld, where you are. I don't know, AMC, is that still a chain there?
Yes, they're in a lot of trouble lately, especially during the pandemic.
About that, yeah.
They are the number one.
Oh, they have a number one? Okay. So, and so half would go to these big cinema houses and chains to make sure that they can pay their bills. And this is how the system is more or less set up. So if we made a $25 million movie, we can assume, based on what we've talked about today so far, that I'm probably going to spend $25 million more to market the film. So I need to bring in $50 million from revenue. But we've learned I only get half the revenue that gets made because I got to split it. So for my $25 million film to break even, I got to find $100 million of revenue to make that make sense. And all of a sudden, things look a bit more daunting. And so in a world like that, especially when today, and it's funny because today, in a sense, is very similar to the 1940s and 50s in a way, where you get one shot at this now, really, and it's that theatrical window. Because then when it gets to streaming, things get a little bit cheap, a little bit sort of silly. So this is why before the 1980s, budgets are relatively small. The first blockbuster is Jaws, and Jaws is 1975. So the idea about spending a ton of money to sort of get a ton of money back on the back end doesn't really, and you see the rise of the blockbuster happens to coincide with the rise of a new sort of distribution strategy or exhibition strategy, if you will. And that's the home video and video rental market. And what does that mean to sort of films? And you think about films that failed finger quotes, their first time at the box office, but managed to find new life on home video, but sort of take a failure or a flop and turn them into a big deal. I mean, everyone's got one they can think of, but I mean, the two ones, and there could be two more different films that sprung to mind for me as soon as I thought of this. Film number one was Shawshank Redemption, which didn't do well at the box office, but found huge life on home video, just great word of mouth.
Absolutely.
And the second one was Austin Powers, which
really?
actually
I would have thought that'd been more successful.
Austin Powers did not do well, but it was highly quotable and it caught on in the home video market. Now, as a result, Austin Powers 2 and Austin Powers 3 make all the money. Absolutely, they make all the money. But the first Austin Powers itself doesn't do very, very well. Because now for the first time ever, you have the ability to go, oh, I saw that, let's rent it. Or I saw that, let's buy it. And you're getting people to take 2 bites of the cherry now for the same film. And we start doing things like building home libraries. And I know my DVD collection back in Canada before I moved over to England is hundreds of DVDs deep. I mean, I'm an absolute cinephile and was a fiend for, if I love a movie, I want that at my disposal. I want the ability to watch that whenever I want, because who can imagine there would ever be a system where I could just go ahead and click a button and watch that movie? I need to own this piece of art in order to make that happen. And so these burgeoning markets sort of created. I mean, for a long time, my parents never went and saw movies, but they loved buying a movie and they loved renting a movie. And this sort of creates that next level. So that's one way in which you were able to go, we don't have to make it all at the box office. There's a secondary revenue stream that could be potentially available to offset some of the risk. Now, another thing you can do to offset some of the risk is if you're making a film in America, for instance, you can sell in advance your distribution rights internationally, where you go, look, if I'm Warner Brothers, if I'm Miramax, if I'm whoever, I will take the risk of distributing the film in the US, but I'll sell international rights to someone else. Best example of this, maybe that jumped to mind, is Pulp Fiction. So Pulp Fiction, the international rights were sold for something like $13 million to a third party on the strength of Bruce Willis's casting. So when they cast Bruce Willis, the film was profitable at that point. So
or at least in the studio's mind.
In the studio's mind, because we're going to put I think it was $8 million or something is the budget. So $8 million in, you get $13 million back. You don't have to split that with anybody. That's not half to the exhibit. That's all $13 million that goes back to you. So you're already $5 million in the clear if you want to stay true to your $8 million budget. And then anything you make at home is gravy. And so that works out relatively well in the grand scheme of things in those situations. And if you have a bankable star, and again, the Hollywood star system, the idea of Bruce Willis's face on the poster is enough to make they thought a success internationally, that would be beneficial. And then it takes all the pressure off of Quentin Tarantino to go, I can make whatever kind of film I want, and no one's breathing down his neck because he's already made a profit. And they're going to worry about the people who actually have money on the line, as opposed to the situation that he finds himself in. I mean, in modern days, you can reduce your risk by filming or shooting or doing elements in locales where they have tax incentive breaks. So you can almost like negatively bring down your budget by just not spending as much. Everything's getting filmed in Georgia these days, isn't it?
Well, that and my old home state of Louisiana.
Louisiana's doing really well these days, actually.
Oh, no, Louisiana's bankrupting itself with these movie credits.
Well, the movie credits, yeah. But I mean, as far as as a location, you see Georgia and Louisiana pop up all the time, which I thought they were going to stop shooting as much in Georgia because of so some sort of legislation that went through about voting that was deemed to be, am I wrong? I thought there was, and there was talk people were going to pull out of shooting in Georgia, but it's not really happening. Everybody seems to still be there. And then we get almost every major film. I don't know what the province of Quebec has to do with the Marvel franchise, but they're on the end. They got some sort of tax credit from Quebec, usually from Ontario, and usually from British Columbia as well. So obviously they're smart where they're taking advantage of tax exemptions, which of course are favorable to these locales because they ensure that their populations work.
Oh, I can give you a little something extra because I have.
Please do.
So I can actually give a little bit of clarity on this because my family actually has some personal experience with this. Now, again, I can only comment on what happens in the state of Louisiana. I don't know if all the movie credits work the same, but I know how Louisiana's works. And essentially what it is, hey, if you come to our state, for every dollar you spend, we're going to give you X amount of tax credit. Now, a lot of times what happens is that tax credit is so good that they end up not having to pay any taxes. But not only not pay any taxes, but it's pretty substantially in the negative. So not only do you not pay taxes, but technically you're owed taxes. Now, those credits aren't refundable, but they are transferable. So what can happen is if you're a movie that wants to go shoot in the state of Louisiana, you spend $10 million, and that $10 million means you can save yourself, say, $5 million in taxes. Well, if your tax bill was only $1 million, well, now you've got this tax credit for $4 million, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not like you get refunded that.
Right.
So what you can do is you can find wealthy individuals or businesses and sell your tax credits to them.
Oh, okay.
So really what you're doing is, hey, you're a big business that, is going to pay $4 million in taxes. If you give me $2 million, you can take this coupon to not pay $4 million in taxes. So on the net, you're saving yourself $2 million.
I hear this. Okay. Yeah.
So not only do the movies have to not pay taxes in the state, but they can get another source of revenue from selling the excess tax credits.
Well, there we go. So I guess the question is, how important is it that your population theoretically is working on, the film industry is working in Louisiana versus the influx of, I guess, corporate tax?
I've seen one of the studies, and it is not great. There's quite a movement to cancel the movie credits thing, but they're not doing it.
No, it's hard because they're going to pull on. Well, if you do this, then how many? What is it? A Louisianan? How do you say? What is a resident of Louisiana called?
Louisianian.
A Louisianian? Okay, Louisianian Skywalker. How many of them will be, out of a job? And there's always that threat, I suppose, that can pull on your heart. It's a hard situation. It really is. Bless you guys. We don't really have bad stuff here. Mainly because the UK it's just one giant sort of overarch. There aren't these individual sort of jurisdictions, states, regions like in Canada. We have provinces, but here in the UK, it's just the one. I guess you have England, you have Scotland, but I don't think any part of it's really a burgeoning film industry per se, at least not in this capacity. But there is a lot of government assistance that can be done here, and a lot of stuff where the National Lottery does funding, and we have television stations that specialize in film production. So things like Train Spotting helped made by a TV channel called FilmThe over here, Channel 4 Films. So, it's really interesting when you've already got the TV station in with the filmmaking side of it. So, there's all sorts of, that's why I say it's a tapestry of funding possibilities that are available to you. I think there's some very skilled account managers working at all sorts of numbers of filmmaking entities in order to acquire the necessary funds.
Oh, absolutely. There's always a nerd like me behind all these deals.
There you go. So we did talk about how there weren't any blockbusters really in the sort of pre-1980s era. And the only exception I would make to that, in a sense, just based on, but I don't know if it's a blockbuster per se, but someone who stumbled upon a magic ticket is the Walt Disney Corporation, if you will. Because Walt Disney sort of figured out the power of nostalgia, and he had to fight his brother on this one, I believe, if memory serves. But the idea being that, if you as a child went and saw The Jungle Book, Peter Pan, whatever the film might have been of your choice then, how do you ever get a chance to see that, if you want to pass that along and have that same experience with your child? There really isn't any. There's no, it might air once in a blue moon on television if you're lucky, but really you're sitting there kind of in the dark. And they stumbled upon the idea of going, well, hang on, this is a never-ending sort of cycle in a manner of speaking. So they would just re-release the film every 8 years or so into cinemas. And that became, in many ways, before there was a home video market, that was the secret of Disney's success in making these films in the long term profitable, was just keep re-releasing them. And to a degree use, they had a platform on ABC, they had a show called Disneyland. And so they already had content in a world where, once you did something once, it was sort of almost thrown away. Disney had this vault, which we'll come back to that term in a bit, on how to sort of keep the coffers rolling. So things like Alice in Wonderland, which was a financial disaster, pretty much off the cuff. Eventually, if you add these all up, does extremely well. Even the Jungle Book by itself, which makes huge money in the end. But it was released in 1967 originally, re-released in 1978, 1984, and 1990 in North America alone, but also throughout the 1970s and 1980s across Europe and elsewhere. Just if there's a lull, put a film you've already done back out there. And at first the inclination was going, that makes us look bad. But then when the money starts rolling in, it goes, actually, I think I'm probably okay with this. And it keeps these stories relevant and fresh. And you have this, what would eventually become the Disney Vault on home video, but you have sort of an early maker of this in the cinemas. Like, I don't even know what we do if they tried to re-release. I mean, very rarely you get some things where Avatar famously re-released briefly in order to reclaim the #1 spot in China, and Avengers Endgame briefly re-released to try and knock Avatar off in the first place, or something like 19 seconds of new footage or something like that. I guess Star Wars re-released the original trilogy before the prequels came out as a way to drum up sort of excitement over the brand and all that stuff. But I mean, these are very much exceptions. You know, if they tried to re-release, I don't know, When Harry Met Sally, I mean, I don't know who's going to see this in any sort of real numbers today, or even back then, because home video does change everything for the most part. And so the selling of rights to television, I think it was James Gunn, I don't want to misappropriate it, but I think it was James Gunn recently said, movies didn't become legendary movies because they ran in theaters. Movies became legendary movies because you saw them on television. I think there's a nugget of truth to this. I mean, I remember, I'm imagining I'm a little bit older than you, Alex, but I remember
maybe a little,
but I remember when it was like the network broadcast premiere of, you know, Inferno or Speed or whatever the movie was, and whatever network of the big 4 American networks managed to sort of get first rights. I mean, everybody in America, North America, would sort of watch ABC, Fox, whatever network it was that night, and they would guarantee themselves a huge rating as a result of this.
You know, I actually remember those.
Yeah,
I remember like the commercials. That'd be the TV premiere of insert movie here, like for the first time in your home screen.
Yeah, like in 2 years it'll be playing on reruns on TBS or something on a lazy Sunday afternoon. They'll just keep flogging it on there. But for that initial first, that was a huge sort of feather in the cap of the network that brought it, but big money as people were trying to draw those, especially those giant A-list blockbuster films. Who can put that on there? And then you have the opposite of that, which is the story behind It's a Wonderful Life. Are you aware of the story behind It's a Wonderful Life?
I don't know, but if it's not called It's a Horrible Production, then I don't want to hear it.
That's the thing. People really rate It's a Wonderful Life. And they think and people think, oh, it's a classic. And actually, when it came out, it was absolutely panned. People did not think it was a very good film. But why do people think it's a great film? Because they grew up watching it over and over and over again. And why did they watch it over and over again? And why is it on every other channel all the time? And why was it featured? Like, you'd watch Home Alone and they'd be watching a snippet from It's a Wonderful Life. And why is this thing present in so many other films? Well, the answer to that is they let the copyright expire by mistake.
I was just about to say it was cheap to put on.
Yeah. So as a result, anybody could put it on. There was nothing to stop you from putting it on TV because of a clerical error. So for something like 35 years, It's a Wonderful Life was free Christmas programming you could put on every year. And because people watched it every year, there became this idea that it was a classic. But it wasn't a classic. It just became people saw it enough that they sort of misinterpreted it until the lie became reality. And people regarded it
until you make it.
Exactly. And people regard it as like an American classic. I will say this, it doesn't play that well outside of the States. You don't see nearly as much of it in Canada or the UK, but it does seem to be held in really high regard by all my American friends. So,
well, of course, why else would they play it every year if it wasn't a film?
That's the logic. Favorite? Absolutely. So, and then the 1980s changes everything. The second window. The thing was, back when home video becomes a thing, originally there is a very large staggered window between when you go ahead and release the film in the cinemas and when the film comes out on any sort of home purchase or rental. And sometimes it'd be rental first and then available to buy. There'd be a difference unless you had like a shady sort of rental owner who would then sort of offshoot the tapes. But I think part of that is also those TV rights. You want to get that TV, that first broadcast in before people can buy it at home, because then you're not going to guarantee that mega audience. But you take like Jurassic Park, which came out in June 93. It doesn't hit home media for 16 months, not until October 94. And as we go on, these windows get shorter and shorter. So it's like Titanic was 9 months Now, granted, it ran for like nine. It was still in cinemas, I think, when it came out. I remember though, my sister it was an event. We went to this really crappy store called Giant Tiger we have in Canada in slang. They call it the GT boutique occasionally because it's this idea of irony to make something such like a really nothing shop sound posh. I'm trying to think. It's like people who call Target Target, I suppose. But like Target's way better than this store. I'm trying to think of an equivalent of just like a really crappy, like you get
Kmart?
Worse than Kmart, but we're getting warmer there. Absolutely. So, but we went there because we figured it was the best chance to get the big double VHS 4-hour or whatever it looked like it was going to be, Titanic. And, you know, the event that became, and it was huge. Everybody knew, and there were signs saying what day it was going to be available on sale. I can't even imagine that today. Little Miss Sunshine in 2006 has a 5-month window. By the time we get to Avengers Endgame, we're looking at like 11 weeks, 10 weeks between the release of the film and when it first hits home media. Like,
I mean, to be fair, now we're doing it simultaneously.
Well, now we're doing it simultaneously, and there's a huge issue, obviously, with that. And so I guess what it means is there's such a panic that if we leave things alone, people will forget about it, because obviously back in the day, you know, your average movie house had 2, 3, 4 screens, and there were much less films in the public eye. And also marketing, you might get one trailer for something, but that's really about it. And now it's like your first teaser trailer, your second teaser trailer. What are we doing at Comic-Con? And all these things that you could easily forget about. So get it out there, make sure we get the money. So, I mean, it's unless you're a really massive cinephile, it can be really easy to go, oh, wait. Maybe not so much now, because where do you buy DVDs now? Amazon, I guess?
I mean, that or like a Goodwill kind of store, or like secondhand, something like that.
Yeah, but if you want
buy
like a new one, like we have a place here called Tesco, which is kind of it's kind of like our Walmart. It's the closest thing we probably have to a Walmart. But, you know, what used to be a giant section for DVDs is now a very small section for DVDs because people just don't buy it anymore. You know, I go into HMV, what used to be a big section for DVDs, because we still have HMVs, a couple of them over here, is now a really small section for DVDs, because people just don't engage with buying physical media anymore. And so what does that mean when we've become so used to free as well? The idea that I pay my subscription, maybe I borrowed my friend's password. Maybe that's going on. Or maybe I have a VPN and I know how to use a torrent site. Maybe. And then all these things which become challenges. So what we need to do is get it out there as soon as possible. Because especially, again, we said the hardware is getting so good. I can go in with a DSLR. I don't do this. But you could go into a cinema with some of the cameras available now and produce a pretty high quality theater rip. You really could.
You might as well just call yourself Jack Sparrow at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And then put it up on the file sharing platform of your choice. And that's that. If I really want to, whatever film comes out, I can probably find within moments, a few days of its release, I can probably find it in some quality out there. And so how do you fight that? Let's get the legit version in people's hands. If I make you wait for it, you're going to find it a different way. So let's get it there to sort of reduce that thing. But as a result, films don't play as long in the cinemas as they used to. And quickly, with the exception of those mega things, Avatar, Endgame, things of that nature, things kind of, let's just get it. I mean, Black Widow's already out of cinemas, 5-6 weeks after whatever. I can't find it at my local. And our local screen here is about 4 screens. It probably plays about 6-7 movies a week. But even a bigger one down by where I work, I don't think I saw Black Widow on the signage board there. And it's going, okay, what is the impact of this? I guess we need Paw Patrol for a little bit longer. I'll take that. So, I mean, I don't know. What was the last time you bought a DVD for your own enjoyment?
Oh, at least monthly. I'm one of those people. Do you
still purchase like physical copies of media?
Oh yeah, because I know that you can go on a streaming service and you have it, but the problem is now is they're playing this shell game. Like, just because Jurassic Park is on Netflix, it's not going to be there forever. Absolutely. Netflix is going to give it to Amazon, who's then going to give it to Peacock, is where it's at now. So it's like, unless you have all of them, you can't guarantee that you can watch Jurassic Park whenever you want. However, if I go hit Walmart in the $5 bin and I find the Blu-ray for $7, it's mine forever.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly the public mindset shifts from gotta have physical copies to now, oh, if I can't just click a button, it's not worth it. What else is on? Because we have we will never get to the bottom. I'll never get to the end of my Netflix list.
No.
And Netflix
well, especially
knows
if
that.
you have multiple streaming services, because
And
now
I
you've got
do.
a watch list on 6 different apps.
Yeah. I got Netflix, I got Prime, I got Disney Plus. I think those are the ones I have currently. Yeah. And that's not even including like the stuff we have with the TV networks over here, where they've got movies usually on demand in some capacity or box sets or things of that nature. So lots of availability. So when you got all that stuff, how do you monetize a la carte? I don't know. People are very quick to go, and I found an alternative solution to that. And that's the problem that we're hitting now. So as opposed to in the 2000s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, we started, consistently saw mega budgets as a result of these multiple shots of revenue. Here's your theatrical revenue. Here's your home media revenue. We're going to pump that together. So I no longer have to make quadruple the budget at the theater to get myself in the black. I can sort of take a couple of bites of the cherry and hopefully make it that way. And, even then we get a direct to DVD market. So there was an opportunity for independent filmmakers to find a way onto a living that way. And occasionally even they kind of went, here's a lottery ticket. And we did The Crow as one of our earlier episodes on the podcast. And The Crow was supposed to be, hey, there you go. And The Crow was supposed to be direct to DVD. Until Brandon Lee dies. And then Paramount goes, I don't really feel comfortable about this anymore. And then Miramax comes in with all those morals they have. And they said, we'll take it. And you know what? They weren't wrong. They made a tiny little sum off of it. But geez, they're kind of exploiting someone's death to get there.
I mean, for a group of people that made Alanis Morissette God, Yeah.
Well, if you're Miramax, you got a lot more problems than just making Alanis Morissette God. Because I believe, is it Miramax Harvey Weinstein?
Yep.
So, there's a lot bigger things on that thing. But then we get Disney and their vaulting of content where they go, here's the DVD and you can have it for 12 weeks. And if you don't buy it in 12 weeks, we're taking it off the shelves. And so that now creates urgency. I have to buy this because if I don't, it'll be gone forever. And this will be my chance. So if I want to, and it sort of creates spikes and a strategy. So there's your theatrical strategy and there's your home video strategy. And of course, while this is going on, you've also got direct to DVD sequels. They're making those terrible Aladdin sequels, Jungle Book 1.5 or whatever it was called as well. Generally, I learned very quickly, skip all these because they're really quite trash, but it's a system that's still working for them today as far as a home video market. Now they don't vault anymore. Now it's all available. You go wherever and they're all there because Disney Plus is all there. You can't have Disney Plus offer everything and then go at the show. Well, physical media will limit you here. And then also don't forget at this time, they're also finding ways to generate extra income through the releasing of soundtracks, which aren't really a thing anymore either.
No, not in the age of Spotify, Apple Music, all that good stuff. You
don't have it was a huge deal. Like the soundtrack to The Bodyguard was like a #1 album. The soundtrack to City of Angels was far more popular than the film was. And J-Lo always had it figured out. When she had a film coming out, she always had a big single coming out at that point. Will Smith, same idea. He'd release a track from the movie. Woo! You know what I mean? Woo! Wild, Wild West. So, these were ways to sort of bump and then a video. Now, the video game still does exist. That's one that we still do see applicable is the video game adaptation. But for the most part, these other things, they don't really generate because tell you about an industry that's doing worse than movies as far as generated income. Music? Come on, who's paying you for music anymore?
Whoever's got Spotify.
That's about it. I'll admit, I do buy the individual tracks still and put them on my phone. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I refuse to do a subscription service for music that in my head I already own. But I do pay for all my music, which makes me probably the overwhelming exception in modern society. But I can't tell you the last time I bought a physical CD. I've got literally thousands of them back home, and I don't know why I would. Now, granted, I'm also at that age where you get to a point where you start going, as most old guys do. I found around the age of 28, you kind of have decided what you like. And it's nothing. I did I'm going off on a tangent here. Apologies. I was working in a factory and I was like, why do people stop listening to new music? And so I started asking people questions about what they liked and what they didn't. And I found out about the age of 28, you stop listening to new music. You kind of go, this is what I like. For whatever reason, maybe music moves on and you're not ready to move on with it. But whatever situation, I said, well, I won't be like that. I was really, really, sort of up to date with music and whatnot. And then I was exactly the rule, the case that proved the rule. Around 28, I just stopped listening to new stuff. If the bands that I liked released new stuff, then yeah, I was listening to that. But as far as discovering new bands, I might discover one new band every couple of years. Like it really is that sort of level. So yeah. But yeah,
I mean, they have a Southpark episode about it. Just at a certain point,
do they really?
Yeah, it's I'll find it and I'll send it to you once we get out of this episode.
Okay, sounds good.
It's basically once you hit a certain point, all new music after that point just sounds like trash, and you just don't like it.
I think music's like language. I think there's that, those slang terms that they're unique to your time as an adolescent or a young person, and they become the things you cling. I think music's the same thing. You go, this is mine. And generally, we tend to let the younger generation go, oh, I like your music. And you're like, oh, yeah, I'm still relevant. But you don't get to cross that bridge the other way. It's like, no, this is ours, old man. And not that you'd probably want to, because I mean, I heard The Weeknd on the Super Bowl, and I didn't get it. I did not. I'm like, why is this guy a thing again? I do not understand this. I don't know what a Post Malone is. I don't know. It's just this terms. I just got my head around what dubstep was, and that stopped being a thing like as soon as I figured it out. So I think I'm just done as far as that goes. I'm just waiting for more Noel Gallagher. and I'm actually kind of asking you two to stop making music now. I'm like, boys, you're 60. It's time to stop.
But they gave you that album for free. I mean,
I was totally cool with that. But then again, I live in the UK where broadband's ridiculously cheap. So when they forced their music into my, like if someone, people get mad. Oh, I can't believe they gave me that music. I'm like, outside of the broadband, I got no problem with that. Because if someone dropped a CD through my letterbox and I came home and I had a free CD, I'm like, oh, cool, free CD. But the minute it was on our phones, like, hey, this is unacceptable. I'm totally okay. So anybody else out there, they want to give me a free CD in my phone, go ahead. I welcome it. And so we've talked a lot so far, Alex, about the big boys and studios, but we haven't talked a lot about independence really. And what happens if you want to go the opposite route. And so I kind of want to talk about the two ways in which generally, if you're an independent, you can get stuff made.
Absolutely.
So the first one is you and I write a script and then we start peddling it to the major studios, and we hope we can get some meetings, or not even major, maybe minor studios. We hope we get some meetings and someone will make our film. And if we want to sort of more or less be involved with the process. And this is what Ben Affleck and Matt Damon do in Good Will Hunting. And you go ahead, and they were offered more money and they said, let someone else play the part. So no, we want creative control. We want to play these roles. So they got like a fraction of what they were sort of being offered because the script was good. But they got to do it that way. And so that's step one. Write a script and shop it and hope that someone picks it up. And then from there, someone, just like everything else, someone options it and makes it into a film. That's step one. Step two, we skip all that and we make the movie ourselves. We arrange whatever funding we can. We make the movie on an absolute shoestring budget. And then we go and we show it at film festivals. And we hope and pray someone will buy it.
There's someone in the audience who knows somebody at Fox, MGM, wherever.
Yeah. And so you used to see a few of these every year. And I'll tell you who was really good for it was a Fox Searchlight. If you ever saw Fox Searchlight as an option, generally it was a little independent film that someone had made elsewhere. A lot of the time it would be a British film. So you would see like The Full Monty was like a Fox Searchlight thing. Four Weddings and a Funeral was a Fox Searchlight. Waking Ned Divine was a Fox Searchlight. And all they had to do with Fox Searchlight is like lottery tickets. So you picked appropriately, but you picked 20 projects a year, maybe less than that, maybe 10 projects a year that you kind of went, this could hit. And you bought 10 and you're realizing that probably 8 of them won't hit, but the 2 that hit will make up for the rest of them by far. And so an example of this probably is Focus Features, who made Little Miss Sunshine. And they made the film on a $8 million budget, and they went to Sundance. And they got to Sundance, and Fox Searchlight said, "We'll give you $10.5 million." At which point they're going, "Okay, that's us. We're 2.5 in the black. We have made a profitable film. We don't owe our shirts to anybody. Life is good." Also, keeping in mind, we don't have to market the film. Fox Searchlight's going to do that. So we've made that 10 and a half, plus they were offered as part of a deal, they got 10% of the gross. So it made $101 million. So another 10.1 million came through the coffers. So basically doubled the price at that point, which is not a bad sort of way. You go, whoo. There's a thing, I wish I had the number on me right now, but the rate of a screenwriter, for the most part, you get a flat rate when you write a script, but you also get something like 1.25% of the gross or something like that. So the two guys who made Endgame made something like $30 million for writing that script.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just massive money. So if you can get in there, I mean, if your thing hits and hits big, you're fine. You'll never have to worry about the next. You just write for fun for the rest of your time.
I mean, if there's one thing I've learned about the movie industry, and I've never been in the movie industry, it's always take a percentage.
Oh, take points. Absolutely. Always take points if you can.
I mean, heck, you end up with what, Keanu and The Matrix, and how many millions he made off of that?
The old thing about how much money did Will Smith throw away by turning that down. Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, you run into the natural follow-up of, would The Matrix have been The Matrix if it was Will Smith?
Yeah, if you're not Keanu going, I know Kung Fu, is it the same thing? Because you don't want to be, woo, I know Kung Fu. Then we've got, and whatever song they would have created for that, Chase.
Mr. Anderson. Woo, haha.
You did not turn into two people on me.
As you can see, we've had our eye on you for some time now, Mr. Anderson.
And then another example would be like something like Four Weddings and a Funeral, another Sundance thing. $4.5 million was the budget. Originally, they offered U.S. distribution rights for $1 million, and no one would take them up on it. Now, eventually someone does, and they make $246 million. So they definitely, again, do okay.
Yeah,
but
just
it's about
a comfortable profit.
It's tidy. That's tidy. I think it puts you in the black.
All in a day's work.
Yeah. And then we go, and the thing that changed, we talked a little bit about it, but Netflix changes everything, which of course it does. Of course it does. It puts HMV in the mom. I mean, my little small town in Canada, we had 3 separate video rental shops. Like, video rental was such a big business. It was like a license to print money. I remember.
You had as many video rental shops as you did like gas stations. I remember with my mom, every Friday we'd go and we'd pick 3 movies. All right, what do we watch on Friday? What do we watch on Saturday? What do we watch on Sunday?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you guys don't have it? Well, fine. We'll go across the street.
Yeah.
They got it.
Chasing sort of store, do you have it? And then also the idea that you could reserve movies. I'm phoning, I'd like to reserve this movie for tonight, please. And they go,
it's like a library. You put a hold on it.
Oh, crazy when you think about it. As opposed to this generation who's growing down will never know, because it's there. You turn on your browser, it's there, and you start playing it. So as a result, we don't buy piecemeal anymore, and films are now dependent on just being present on Netflix or Amazon or whatever. And as a result of this, because I've said, the benefit of digital is that I can do blanket marketing, blanket distribution. It can play everywhere at once. The benefit of digital is I can have it on Netflix that goes across the globe. Fantastic. The downside to digital, it's so easy to pirate and distribute. So piracy goes through the roof. And if you're a big corporation, you can take the hit. You can take the hit on your margins.
Walmart. They understand they're going to get a certain amount of shoplifters every year. You just got to budget for it.
Game of Thrones, most pirated TV show in the world, and they loved it because it raised there's, as long as 60% of people still actually pay for it, they're fine, and they love it. So it's that kind of an idea as well. This isn't like the old days where piracy was like shady VHS tapes you bought on the street, or when your first friend got the DVD burner and everybody went nuts burning each other's DVDs and half of them didn't work. This is
you
like
wouldn't download a car, would you?
You wouldn't steal a car. Stealing movies is a crime. But now we have the torrents, and it became. I remember in the height of Napster. And they said, and now the big thing is movies. And Disney's worried about what'll happen with movies. And I'm like, it will never get to the point where I can download a movie. Oh, how wrong I was. So naive about where the internet was going to take us. And the ISPs are somewhat complicit because, they know when they're giving you these download speeds of whatever. They know what you're going to use most of it for. It's no different to the people who sold you blank DVDs going, no, use this. We don't think you're going to use this for pirated material.
You're using this to do your own filmmaking, right?
Yeah, this is you're buying blank cassette tapes because you are just taking notes for your class, I'm sure, in a portable recorder. So, what do you do when people are profiting off of what they know is piracy? And that's when they start to crack down within reason. I mean, I don't know what the rules are about piracy in the US. I mean, famously, they used to be quite severe. In the UK, they're quite lax. Just don't be the one who uploads it. Is basically the way the UK generally works. There's a list. You don't want to be on the list of like the great. If you're within the top 10%, I'm just making this number up, but there is like a thing, and those people will get the warning letters. And as long as you stay below the line, you're generally okay. Now, I've got no problem going ahead and dropping £3 to watch. Oh, what did I watch? Splash. Oh, it was actually Splash to Disney Plus. What did I watch? That was terrible. The Burbs for our Tom Hanks Real Roundtable. And, Amazon offers me it. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't need to go to that length. But if I'm a teenager who has no money, and you have the option between can watch it free now, or I can hope one day it shows up on a streaming platform that I have, I can imagine the decision is pretty easy to pirate it. But the exception to the problem, of course, as has been the case throughout our discussion, is Disney. And
of
why
course,
is that?
I mean, you've got the people that single-handedly increased the, what's it called? The copyright for...
Yeah, the Mickey Mouse copyright.
Domain.
Public domain.
Something domain.
Public domain.
Yes, extending the public domain thing just so they can hold on to Mickey Mouse.
Yep. And I believe that will never... Mickey Mouse will never be public domain. It never will. Because to be frank, when those laws were written, nobody had an idea that something could be in the public consciousness and could be monetarily valuable for as long as things are now. I think it's an out of date. As much as I do like to rag on Disney and go, they're ridiculous. I mean, there's value in the Mickey Mouse, in the Mickey Mouse brand. There just is still to this day. I mean, otherwise I don't need to walk into Tesco or into Target and get myself, a set of Mickey Mouse's laxatives because someone, realized that Mickey can be used in the public. But no, they're quite bulletproof. And because, if they've created for Disney, the key thing is whether it bombs or not, have you created intellectual property that we can use going forward? Much more valuable than the gate receipts coming back in is, can we do something else with this character, whether it's merchandise, whether it's stuff they can do with their parks, whether it's just content they can put on Disney Plus, content they can put on their Disney Channel, Family Channel, whatever it's called in the States now, stuff they can put on ABC. I mean, all these things are just ways to take this piece of something you've made and get more money out of it or value out of it in the long run. And so, consider their purchase of Star Wars, okay? And people were going, oh, it's going to take 3 films for them to make up the money that they spent on acquiring the Star Wars. Okay, you're not wrong, but in the same breath, for every $1 they make in box office receipts, they make $10 in merchandising.
I mean, how much money are you paying for a lightsaber when you go to Galaxy's Edge?
Yeah. So, I was surprised George Lucas didn't see that part of it coming, because he basically revolutionized the game with merchandise, with the toy game. No one else was thinking of this before him. So he way undervalued his brand. Way undervalued it.
Well, we're assuming he sold 100%. Like, if I was George Lucas,
I am
I'd keep
assuming
5%.
It seems like he's been frozen out. He's on Hoth, trying not to freeze to death when he has his ideas. And they go, that's great, George. You just sit over there. And so, we got Marvel, we got Star Wars, we got Disney Animation, even things like High School Musical. Everything is creating IP that we can market and merchandise, whether it's direct merchandising in their shops or in their theme parks, or it's indirect merchandising, which you can do at Walmart or Target and back to school shopping. Make sure you've got your High School Musical backpack or whatever the cool fit, your Phineas and Ferb, whatever it is, you can go ahead and monetize now. Black Widow, whatever it is, just no matter how much money Black Widow loses, they'll make it up in the merchandise on the back end. Absolutely.
I mean, you got the Halloween costumes. You've got the Black Widow running around Disney World somewhere. And that's the thing, too, that I was going to mention earlier, going back to re-releasing a film every 8 years. Like, when your target market is children, you have a 100% new demographic every 5, 8, 10 years. So you can re-release it and it's 100% new to those people.
And when you're a child, so, it's one thing when we're here, we talked about music a little bit earlier, and I remember when I had like 4 CDs in my collection, and I knew those CDs backwards and forwards. I knew what the liner notes said. And when you get older, each new CD you buy, generally nothing's as good as the first or second album of a band you really like, and so on and so forth. Because with time, things become a little less special. But when you're a kid and you've seen like 6 movies, I mean, it's that age where you wear the video out. And I'm not speaking specifically just about the thing. I'm talking about these kids who just go nuts for Frozen, and they've got the play set, and they've got the dress, and they've got, the bedspread, and all these things, because that's everything they are in life. They love Frozen. And all the family members go, what's she into? Frozen. Cool. And they just buy Frozen stuff. So if you can master VIP, I mean, the sky's the limit. All the film has to do is establish the IP as being legitimate. Buy it as being something that's worth investing in. Whether it makes money or not, as long as a big enough percentage are on board with it, you can market the crap out of it. So it's like Doctor Who here in the UK. If Doctor Who runs at a deficit for, well, to be fair, we don't have advertising. But say if it runs a little bit over budget and you're like, we don't really have this in the budget, they'll make it up on the back end with all the merchandising they do with Doctor Who stuff and the worldwide distribution. I mean, the thing's just a license to print money. And so because of this situation, everything now we find, and we just talked about it, where's the safety net? The safety net is in established IP. It's in making sequels. It's in adapting comic books. It's in these brands. And then if it's not sequels, it's reboots. And if it's not a reboot, let's take a young adult novel and we'll make a film series out of that. And this is where everything's coming from. So this is the part which means that now if you're the independent filmmaker that we talked about, you can't get into the cinemas. And it should be easier. And actually, the numbers show that since we switched to digital projection systems in cinemas, it's actually become harder to get in, which makes no sense because this should have been the chance to get in. And it's not. The door is locked. Matt Damon famously recently went on about the loss of the Hollywood leading man. I'm sure he doesn't have a horse in that race at all. But the idea being that I guess it's the star system's in decline. What's the star of films these days? Is it Matt Damon? Is it Brad Pitt? Or is it the costume? Is it who's playing Spider-Man this week? Is it who's Iron Man? The IP is stronger now. For the first time in memory, the IP is stronger. You can put anybody in the Iron Man suit and make him into a star. Who was Anthony Mackie? Who was Anthony Mackie before, now I'm sure he's a talented actor, but he wasn't a star. So these franchises make you a star. Who was Liam Hemsworth? Yes, Robert Downey Jr. was something. Is a risk, is what he was. But, for the most part, these things that they're casting, maybe not ScarJo, but large numbers of these are ones that we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the IP and make our own stars. Thank you very much.
I mean, it's Star Wars. You get a whole bunch of no-name people, and then the one guy you can really anchor it, the Harrison Ford, and then you just move on from there. Make your own stars. Move on from there,
make your own stars. And then you're not at the mercy of anybody. They're at the mercy of you. And the thing is, can you get into the MCU? Now they're lining up to get into the MCU because that means relevance. Because there just aren't films anymore. I mean, Matt Damon said, you look back at 97, they're all like newly created scripts. People went away, presented scripts, and they got turned into big movies. Would Independence Day be made today? Probably not. Probably not, because it doesn't exist. You're going to spend $200 million. I'll spend it on a piece of existing IP because I know that'll get me a guaranteed. If I'm Warner Brothers, give me something else in the Batman universe. Who's a character we haven't done yet? Let's do that because people will identify with that. And so as a result, our choice of films is getting even more restrictive. And I'm trying to make sure I get the right ones here. There's a couple of media theorists called Curran and Seaton who basically said as the pool of people at the top of these conglomerates gets smaller, so as Disney buys out 20th Century Fox and the pools get smaller and smaller and smaller, we should see less creativity. And if you want creativity, you have to go to these little independent ones at the bottom. The problem is independent ones at the bottom can't get shown. Mm-hmm. And in order to make sure they don't lose money, the ones at the top will just keep giving us more of the same. And I went and saw The Suicide Squad and Free Guy. And Free Guy was a new idea, so I give him credit for that. But when I was sitting there, every trailer I saw was for an existing piece of IP. The most creative thing I saw was Dune. And that's just because it's a video game adaptation. I was like, at least it's not a direct reboot, sequel, whatever. So, I don't think I'll go see it, but but I was like, it's the most original, I suppose. Yeah.
The most haven't seen it before.
I haven't seen it before, even if you tried really hard to make it look like Mad Max Fury Road. I whatever. But such is. I mean, and so this is what we end up with. So if you're
Are you familiar with Screen Rant at all?
Oh, I am familiar with Screen Rant. Love Screen Rant.
Are you familiar with the what's it called? The pitch meeting series?
I love pitch meetings.
There is one, if you haven't seen it. It's what every conversation with a studio executive is like.
Oh, it's about what is this part of a universe? Is this
yeah, that's exactly what you're describing.
Part of like a mom's universe. No, this is exactly what's occurring. The guy's spot on. Really, really is. It just makes me, and I'd be honest, when I open it up, I gotta be really careful. I used to be such a Marvel fan, and as we move on, I'm getting so fatigued. Not because of
the formula.
The formula, and it's because it's the only thing on the menu now. That's the thing. Occasionally I want to go, I wouldn't mind something else. When was the last time we saw a big budget rom-com come out? Do those things exist anymore? Or are they just, we put on Netflix for like the Hallmark Channel now and things of that nature. Like we don't do those.
Well, and that brings up another thing, because even if it's not in big cinema, and I completely agree with you with the guys at the top, and we're not having a lot of creativity, or rather we're seeing a lot less creativity, but I would argue maybe not that it's easier to get in theaters, but it might be easier to get your idea out there because you have entities like Netflix that are given however many billions of dollars a year to try to get original content. So I'd argue that, yes, you can't get into maybe theaters, but if you're trying to make content to put out there, I'd argue that Netflix is doing more than the actual movie industry.
And the question that becomes, do we regard films that go straight to Netflix as different from films that are released theatrically? We were lucky enough to have Sean Prasad, who was in Mank, come on the show and talk about the process. And he knew from minute one it was going to be a Netflix film. It was right on his contract or on the casting call or whatever it was when he started up. And there is that. Maybe it's shifting a bit, but
it's the question of, is it a real film?
Is it a real film?
If it's on Netflix.
There is a question. I think we're willing to go, some are exceptions. Some are. For the most part, though, when you go, Tom Hanks is in one on Apple TV, you go, how many Netflix original films have you seen with a big star and you watch and you're like, this is crap.
They showed up to collect a paycheck, and it's obvious.
Yep. Adam Sandler, you were collecting a paycheck in the theatrical world for a long time. Now you're moving on to do it at Netflix. God bless you. Every now and then there's an exception. That's done extraordinarily well, and I've got a couple of examples, but it does make me go, if the cinema, because I got a real question at the end. Because I do wonder if the cinema world can maintain super blockbusters anymore in a world post-COVID.
I think I'd add a little bit onto that. Can it be sustained if it's not an already existing IP?
Well, we're looking, I've got some numbers for some things that came out recently, just for a little bit later, but well, what is an existing IP?
Well, if you were to release the new Marvel movie, if you release a new Marvel movie, and it's clearly a Marvel, Doctor Strange, if that came out and it was 100% in theaters, no Disney Plus at all, I think that was something that could single-handedly jumpstart theaters around the world.
Well, we're going to find out, because there's a couple of big tentpole films that have to drop. And the other problem is we don't have any breathing space. It's going to get real crowded real quick.
You think it's all going to come out this summer or rather next summer? Before
that, yeah. You talk about independent films. You kind of have to get in the bed with one of them. I've got a couple of, I've been fortunate enough to know a couple of people who've made some films. I have a friend who I went to university with, and he's now working with a production company, I think based out of Toronto, and they did a film called The Kindergarten Teacher, which starred Maggie Gyllenhaal. And it's really highly recognized. It's like 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. She was getting some minor Oscar buzz for a role. Watched it. Really good film. It is the exception to the rule. Really, really good film. But you had to get in bed with Netflix was what it said then. I found it on Amazon Prime over here. And again, different districts and regionalities and whatnot. And that's all right. And then we were fortunate enough to have Jay Salahi, the director and one of the co-writers of Northwood Pie, on the pod. And he talked quite openly about the finances behind his deal. And he said that he was offered 2 deals by Amazon Prime. And it was, look, you can either have complete control over your film and we will just be the place where people can watch your film. And for that, you'll get something like, 5 cents for every hour they watch or something. Or we can go ahead and it can be an Amazon Prime movie. We'll put the Amazon Prime, original movie sort of sticker on it, and you'll get like 12 cents as opposed to 5, and you get global distribution, whereas before he could only get North America. And so, his thing is, all right, then he signed on, and I don't blame him whatsoever. I'm not here to pass judgment on what's right or what's wrong, but I'm just going, now those are people who are actually, the UK was the only region which didn't get it for free, ironically. So it was fine. We didn't mind paying for it whatsoever. Now, I don't know what his deal is for when we pay for it, how that works in that capacity. But, it's at a deficit. Now, you can say I've got one there and it's got distribution and there it is and it's up there and I've made a movie. And those things are huge because that helps you sort of have the next conversation about the next film you do. I don't know. I think the big money will always be in cinemas, and the only way you get the big money at Netflix is when you've proven you can do the big money at cinemas, and it means something when they draw you to do an exclusive movie on that streaming platform. But is there an opportunity to have outreach there? Yeah, there is. We're very lucky with Best Film Ever. We're starting to get to the traction where people are getting a hold of us and wanting us to review their stuff. And we've had to turn someone down recently because they only had North American distribution. And I went, hey, do you guys got like British distribution? Because we're a British podcast, and if we can't watch it, I can't really interview you about watching your film. They went, oh, no. I said, well, if that changes, go ahead, let us know. Because we're always in the mood to sort of chat movies. People on the inside, it's really quite humbling and quite flattering that people are reaching out to us as much as we continue to reach out to others. So I don't know. And then what happens if you lose your spot? Like you said, like you're playing the shell game. And then, if you're terrified, what happens if Netflix drops me? What happens if Netflix drops me? What does happen if Netflix drops you and no one else will pick you up? So we've got 2 or 3 oligarchs here. You've got Netflix, you got Amazon Prime. Who else has global reach? Disney Plus, but Disney Plus is doing stuff that they've sort of created. They're not bringing in third-party stuff. So it's really difficult to go, well, where is your foot in the door and how good or bad of a deal do you have to sign on for in order to get your spot there?
Yeah. I mean, it might end up turning into, like, if I'm projecting and just kind of pulling something out of nowhere, it might turn into like Netflix and the streaming services are just a resume builder. Like you go to Miramax or you go to Fox and it's like, oh, well, what experience do you have? Oh, well, I've done these 2 Netflix movies.
Yep. I've made them. You can find them here. That's where you can locate them, and it becomes almost, like you said, like a digital cloud-based resume of the work you've done. Yeah. As opposed to let me send you my film. At least it's there.
Let me send you a link.
Yeah. And then, we're kind of in this brave new world, and then COVID happened. And I think we're seeing the film industry isn't too big to fail. The Suicide Squad, $180 million budget. It's made $110 million. And it's got like 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like the buzz is great.
I'm really hoping that movie does well because I like the idea of the Suicide Squad. I love the characters. I love the IP. I really want it to be successful. I want there to be a stream of movies here. And
I think so too. We went and saw, we did a theater skip it, which will be coming out in the next couple of weeks on the pod. But yeah, I would like to see more. I would. And I like what they've done. I like the tone. And I don't know if you have to get James Gunn back. I imagine you would because something was there. But I don't know what you do, because if you think about it in the sort of numbers we were sort of talking about, that thing probably was projected to bring home $750 million, and we're at 110. I don't know what you do. Free Guy, $115 million budget. Now it's 20th Century Studios, which is now an offshoot of Disney. So it's made 113.5. Now, like we said, though, now they've got another thing. They've got content, so they can go ahead and they can put that. They can put that on Disney Plus in a matter of months. And they've already announced they want to do a sequel, so they're okay there. But
heck, I haven't seen it, but isn't it based off of it's a video game character?
Yep.
I mean, they can turn around and publish a video game.
Oh, the skins of him in Fortnite and all. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with this. But Tenet, they've delayed forever, $200 million budget, probably looking at $1 billion they wanted. They brought home 364. What does No Time to Die have to make? It's a $250 million. So this is one of the big tent poles. No Time to Die. Daniel Craig's last shot at Bond. You got to think he's got points on this.
Absolutely. I mean, it's basically Black Widow's deal. It's like, hey, give me some points. This is my last thing. This has got to be my big
because they talked him into doing it. And so he probably went all points on this. $250 million budget. It's got to be $400 million in marketing, because I've had to market the film like 3 times over. So at a minimum, 650, that's $1.3 billion as a break-even point by my rough sort of estimate. in a film that won't take home. I mean, if it's supposed to be end of September, and like when I went and saw Free Guy, and Free Guy's not doing poorly, and the buzz has been good. The cinema was 10% full, if that, when I went and saw it. You know what I mean? Like, people aren't going to the cinemas, and then what's happening? We're hearing rumors the cinemas are going to close, and if that actually happens, if these cinemas start to shut down, the economics of the film industry we currently sit in no longer makes sense. And I think instead what you have to do is you have to come back to the era of the $30 million budget.
Yeah.
The only one who's too big to fail, I think, is Disney. But MGM just got bought out just a few months ago. It might even just been a month or two ago by Amazon. So if they take a hit, I mean, they can do stuff with it in the long run, and they'll get stuff with video games and brand. The Bond iconography and brand isn't going to die, pun not intended. But if you're Daniel Craig, what's going to happen there? And that brings us to the ScarJo lawsuit. I mean, she was told exclusive theatrical rights, and she had points on it. And then you go ahead and you do this direct public, what is it called? Premier access on Disney Plus. You know, how do you monetize that?
Kills me. Like, if you're just to throw my 2 cents in on that lawsuit, like, I don't get how that doesn't count as quote unquote box office sales. People are paying to see the movie. I would think if you're paying the $19.99 or however much it costs to watch it on Disney Plus, even though you already have a membership, like, I would think that would factor into the equation.
In the 80s, recording artists got fleeced on compact discs because when they signed their RIAA sort of contracts as a collective, what happened was they got a certain percentage of royalties on cassette tapes and vinyl, but for any experimental new formats, it was like a tenth of what they were getting. And when the market switches to CDs, the record labels laugh all the way to the bank. And I wonder, is streaming the new Wild West where you go, we can really stick it to some of these individuals? Now, if she's, what do? You just delay the film forever? I'm going legally. If she's negotiated this in good faith, you can't release that film. Not on Disney Plus because she doesn't have access to those monies. And we don't even know how those monies make sense. I mean, if I'm spending, how much was it in the States to watch Black Widow? Do you know?
I don't know.
No,
it's been on my list. I haven't watched it yet.
Let's say it was $25. So what's that? 2.5 movie tickets, maybe? Now, if I'm spending $25, I'm probably inviting everybody I know over to come around and see it. And we're all chipping in a bit.
Or
like watching a boxing or a UFC pay-per-view, right? Everybody puts a $5 into the pot. We make some food and that's it. But you're only seeing $25 worth of box office for what's probably $100 worth of viewing out of it. So I don't even know how the economics work in that regard either. And of course, this is the same strategy that Warner Brothers is using for all their 2021 releases. Everything Warner Brothers does in 2021 was equally release it on HBO Max and in the cinemas simultaneously when the cinemas were open. So without movies, the exhibitors could crumble. But without exhibitors, what does it mean for the movie industry? And it's like the old adage when they're trying to get everybody to buy 3D TVs a few years back. And nobody wanted to buy a 3D TV because there wasn't programming in 3D. But nobody wanted to shoot footage in 3D because no one owned a 3D TV. And say it was this vicious circle where no one was willing to make the first move. And I worry this could cripple the film industry. I mean, Marvel is giving me, we said talk about tentpole. We've got No Time to Die, but Marvel has 3 films in 2021 still to release. And in the next 365, if you include the release date of Black Widow, they are releasing 7 films. We used to get 3 in a year. They're releasing 7 films. Black Widow, Shang-Chi, The Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange 2, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Panther 2. I do not see a way that all of these things are able. But the problem is you got to stop the backlog because you've been building up movies forever. You got to release them, I guess. But thank God Disney's got deep pockets. I think they're going to lose billions.
I'm sure they're not going to hurt.
They're going to lose billions directly at the box office. They'll make, like I said, I think they are the ones who are too big to fail.
Yeah, and part of me worries is that, I mean, if we fast forward a couple years and we go into, it's hard to have independent movies, or if you're not part of a universe, like your movie is not getting put out, that naturally is going to shrink the pool of the kinds of movies that are going to come out and the number of movies that are going to come out. And supply and demand, if you are stuck with these few studios putting out these same archetypes of movies, I think we're going to see a quality decrease.
Oh, for sure. It's just who's going to be the first. What is the next thing and who's going to be first in the pool with it? Because in the late 90s, it was disaster movies. In the mid 2000s, it was raunchy R-rated comedies. And then for about 13 years now, it's been superhero films. has been the thing. And why do they keep making so many superhero films? Because people keep going to see superhero films. And when the market tells us they want something else, they'll start making it. But we need to find out what that is. And maybe this is the chance to see something new. I really hope it is. But I think, like I said, the only player out there, as the time of recording, who has distribution ability in cinemas, has their own TV channel and network, if you consider ABC television, the range of ancillary revenues through merchandising and their theme parks, and the only one of the group who has a global streaming platform, because we don't get Paramount over here. So I'm dying for Paramount Plus to hit. And you've got a war chest of the most appealing, marketable, and valuable IP on the planet. They control the production, they control the distribution, and if their streaming service ends up being the only exhibition point, that sounds a lot like what the 1948 Paramount Decree was supposed to change.
I was getting ready to make the comment that we've gone full circle.
We have, and that's really kind of where my sort of structured thoughts end. But I'm not sitting here saying hate Disney, but I am sitting here going, I hope as a film lover, as someone who's a cinephile, as someone who loves art, I love a comic book movie, nothing against it. Some of my favorite movies are comic book movies. I just want there to be more than just that on the menu. And I like Star Wars, I like Marvel, I like Disney animation, I like these individual worlds they've created, but I really want there to be something new. And it feels that in all walks of entertainment, we're leaning towards same old because it's not risky. And I'm looking for, I want to see new original ideas again. And, Free Guy was something, even if it does feel really Westworld adjacent, it was something. And so I'm just waiting for what that next thing is. And I've got my Disney Plus subscription, but I'm just wanting to see another player. Competition and variety is good for everybody.
Absolutely. And look, I'm fully aware that there are going to be listeners to this episode that are your listeners and not necessarily mine and may not be as financially focused. But I do want to throw a comment out here for some of your listeners who I'm sort of borrowing for this episode.
Yeah.
There is a saying in finance that when you can invest that if a company does well, you win. If a company does poorly, you win. You can invest either way. Rule number one, if you're going to buy or sell individual stocks, is you do not with the mouse.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's an actual quote out there. You just don't do it. Don't bet against Disney.
When you think about how close they were to bankruptcy in 1989 before The Little Mermaid gets released, they are on the brink. They're maybe not like the theme parks would be fine, but the animation studios ready to shut down in 1989, and The Little Mermaid changes everything. It's of a juggernaut they are today. It's astounding. Same with Marvel. How close they were to being out of business to the juggernaut they are today. It's
absolutely.
The idea about you can bet on companies going up and you can bet on companies going down. At some point, we got to do The Big Short, and we definitely got to have you on for that, because I love The Big Short, but we could really use someone on the inside to explain that stuff better than Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling do.
Oh yeah, because I love that movie. They for their credit, they do a lot to explain to the layperson how this stuff works. But there's also a whole lot of, well, from hearing that information, you would think, well, why couldn't they do X and then Y would have happened?
Yeah, it'd be good to have someone you could ask a question to in that regard. I was okay with it, but I've watched it with a couple of the other people from the pod where we're going, I don't get it. And I think it's something you have to get in order to be invested in the motivations of the characters. So
look, any and all excuses to come talk with you and the gang.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
Y'all want someone to come and teach y'all a little bit about some personal finance? Well, it wouldn't be personal finance. That's high level corporate finance, but I got my degree in it.
There we go. We're definitely looking for something to have you come on for. We're just looking for the right thing, as well as we got a busy schedule for the rest of 2021. But you are my penciled down in my gotta find something for him category.
We scratched you off my list for that.
Yeah, that's true. There we go. Because you came and did Catch Me If You Can with us, and that was I was a fun go, and people really seemed to enjoy that one, which I don't blame them for. It's a great movie. It was a good choice. I really quite like. There was a whole lot of fun. There's some financial sort of stuff in there, but overall, I think it was just kind of a fun movie to come have a chat on, and you're very, very insightful. So definitely, we don't want to pigeonhole you as just the money guy. That's for sure. Although
Hey,
I know
look,
that's what
money
your
guy, movie
podcast
guy,
is.
I'll
Here you
take
are,
it.
the money guy. But when you're on ours, I mean, you can kind of stretch the wings and be the movie guy as well. So yeah, it was good.
You know, one of these days, y'all have to do a horror movie. It's got to be on y'all's chart.
Well, what's the definition of horror? Because some people said Silence of the Lambs. I don't think it is. People say
No.
Silence of the Lambs, which we've done Scream. I mean, that's kind of horror adjacent at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a huge definition or a huge divide.
It's
between
very broad.
Horror and like gore.
Yeah, if it's gore, you won't get Liam. There's just no way you'll get Liam.
No, I hate gore. Like gore for the sake of gore. Like you take like Saw, like that's just nonsense.
I don't mind the idea of the psychological element of Saw. It just gets a bit. I think some of the gore itself, some of the viscerality, if you will, just gets a bit intense and could definitely be a deterrent. I definitely not. I mean, something that would be defined as a slasher movie. I don't think there's any chance that's going to happen. But things that are more. I mean, something like The Thing. I can imagine getting a viewing. Rosemary's Baby, we did watch once back in the day, and it's on the poster, so they're going to have to do it at some point again.
Well, hold on. I got to know, because there's one on my wish list that I want. Well, technically two, but Alien.
Alien, yeah, that would be. I'm definitely not opposed to doing Alien. It's a slow burn. I've got a great story about that. A promise I made that I need to fulfill about Alien, actually. But yeah, no, I made it halfway through, and then it's amazing how ADHD we get as a society. I was going, okay, I gotta go somewhere. I'll pick this back up, but it was such a slow burn, and everyone back to it. But Alien will definitely be watched at some point on the pod. I have no doubt of that.
Yeah, I was tweeting y'all like 2 months ago because it was the 35th anniversary.
Yeah, it's the problem. It's the anniversary of everything at some point. I mean, I missed a massive one. I'm trying to. I missed the 40th anniversary of Raiders. So I missed a big one there. But just sometimes we go. I could do another anniversary, or I could actually let some of the panel choose a movie for once. So yeah, we went down that road instead.
See, that's the problem too. There's so many good movies.
That's part of the reason why I think our pod will. I guess some staying power. There are some movie podcasts that tend to go, and we see a lot of it. I'm not trying to be disparaging, but movie podcasts in a nutshell tend to skew towards one gender line, usually male. Not exclusively. There's some that skew hard female, but like, more often than not, you'll get, this week we're doing Seven, and then we're going to do The Shawshank Redemption, and then we're going to do Heat, and then we're going to do Goodfellas.
Demolition Man.
Yeah, Demolition Man. And then we're going to do Blade Runner. And it's like, all right, these are all geared towards a specific type of male, probably 20, 30 something kind of guy, and you don't have that range. And in order to appreciate a Blade Runner, I mean, I think, have a palate cleanse, and, the next week you do, I'm trying to Steel Magnolias or A Breakfast Club, and then you do a rom-com, and then you do a historical piece. And I think the breadth, I mean, we do have pretty strict rules about what films we allow on the pod in general, but even within that, I mean, the wish list is as long as my arm, and every week new movies get released, and a fair number of them are eligible. So I don't think we're ever really going to reach the end of our window for that. It's been a heck of a ride. We're very fortunate to have found an audience that we have. We have a lot of fun doing it. I do have a strategy. I do have a plan. Because I don't just want to turn on the mics and be like, what do we do? What are we doing next? I don't know. All loosey-goosey, because I want that to be the feel of the conversation. I want that to feel natural, and I think it is. But I think the strategies about overall vision, I think those things do have to be sort of purposeful and sort of planned out in a sense. So I'm also very thankful that the three people I do the pod with just kind of let me rule it with an iron fist.
Look, I'll be straight up with you. So I've been listening to you guys. Let's say your podcast started, I want to say it was like 4 months before mine.
Okay.
And I think I discovered y'all around like episode 4 or 5.
Okay.
Is where I discovered y'all, and I've been with y'all ever since. I remember like the first 2 or 3 episodes, I'm sitting here like, man, this guy just does not let the other 3 people get a word in. Like, this is like, this dude's just a tyrant.
Oh.
But then I kept listening. I'm like, and then I was hearing a little bit. I think y'all found y'all's formula. and it really, really works.
Yeah, I moderate. I think that's the best way I can do it, is that I sort of walk us through the film in general. And I do try to throw to people before I give my own opinion. I try to sort of lay out, here's what's going on. Here's what I saw. What do you guys think? And then hopefully it's pinged back to me and I can sort of encapsulate. Because the gimmick is, of course, that, I deal with films professionally for a living. Analysis of a film is kind of called, Tuesday for me, or, and then sort of I let them have their sort of layman's whatever. And then if need be, I can come in and sort of do a little bit about maybe a little bit of education. I don't mean that to at all be critical, but I'm going, you see what they're doing with this is they're trying to evoke feelings of, or this is an homage, or this is something to that. And at the start, I think like most people, you can always tell someone who's a first-time podcaster for sure, who we have as a guest, because they get really, really anxious about saying more than 5 words at once. And then it's up to you to sort of fill that space. So in the early episodes, I think you were hearing me sort of try and fill the space as I'm reading their sort of body language and the eyes and all that stuff, and trying to give people enough time. And so I try to set things up verbally before I throw to them. So at least I've given them something they can react positively or negatively to. In order, so that's just, I guess, sort of the art of podcasting. But I'm obsessed with that side of it. I mean, there's people who I listen to on a frequent basis, professional and amateur, and I go, okay, I like what they're doing here, or I like kind of how they've developed this thing here, and I like the persona they're achieving by doing this there. And we don't want any of it to feel fictitious, but in the same breath, we also want to be engaging. And so it's kind of just like professional wrestling in a sense. They say the best pro wrestlers are the ones who are like themselves, but they just turn the volume up and sort of exaggerate some of their quirks. And I think that's what we've tried to do. And I think we really do lean into being a personality-driven podcast where, I probably come off as a bit pretentious from time to time. Hopefully there's a few other things that come off as well. Whereas Liam's the everyman. Georgia's got her whole face blindness kind of
The
gimmick
icky
thing.
man.
Pardon me? Icky man, yeah. Those sort of catchphrases. And then Ellie's kind of the mom of the group, the sort of adult who sort of maybe tries to keep us a little bit in line from time to time. But she's a bit of a hopeless romantic as well, as is Liam. So, as we kind of find and develop our niche, I don't want to say persona sounds a bit fake, but it's not. But sort of the sides of our personalities that we want to emphasize. That's probably the best way to put it.
The part that you want to show.
Yeah. Hopefully people, I do think that people seem to find themselves much like, a band or like a sitcom. You find your favorite personality on the panel. You find your favorite character in a sense, and you sort of identify with them. I think people do that. I know Georgia's got her fans. I know Ellie's got her fans. I know Liam's got his fans. I know I've got my fans. And those are always really quite fun. And we play with those. And a lot of the times we do polls or votes, or I'm putting it up, or you made a mistake. Those things are designed to kind of fuel that sort of feeling of community. And we're very lucky to have had a community, and you're a huge part of that community. So whenever someone from that group is like, hey, come on. There's no way I would have said no to coming on. I've learned a lot from listening to your pod. Some of the stuff's America-centric, as I've said a few times, I think, and some of the stuff but then there's just some general practical goodness, and probably stuff I wish I'd known when I was a bit younger as well. So I wouldn't have got myself into some bad habits. But it's always a delight to speak to you, Alex. I don't know what else to say.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you told me a while ago about, like, I would made a comment and you were like, yeah, a lot of your stuff is pretty American specific. And I make a conscious effort now to make as much as I can as internationally applicable as possible.
I mean, it depends, not to turn this into sort of podcast form, but it depends on what your audience looks like it is in your metrics. If you find your audience is like 81% American or something like that, then I'd probably I'd feel okay steering into that side of it. Maybe just having a couple of nuggets for the international peeps. I know for us, we're about 46% American. It's our biggest market, as is, everybody's biggest market for the most part.
But it's the biggest podcast market.
It is by far. And so I do try to, when the panel comes up with these Britishisms, I always try to act as a bit of a cultural interpreter, where I go, okay, when they say this, what they mean is this, because we really we're ridiculously fortunate to have a very broad audience all over the world. And it's great. The ones who tend to chime in tend to be actually people who engage with us are more often than not British, which is really kind of funny, considering how much American download we get. Probably I'd say it's about 30% of our feedback comes from America and 70% comes from the States, with a smattering, maybe 5%. So I've just made 105%, but I'm okay with that. 5% coming from sort of the outer rim, if you will.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry. Rule number 1 when you're doing a finance show, and I'll just share it with you, never do math while you're recording.
Oh, no.
It's always wrong.
I'm pretty good at maths, actually. We say math. Look at that. I've totally become accustomed to acclimatized to the UK. I said maths, plural. In Britain, it's maths, plural, and sports, singular, as opposed to sports and math.
Yeah, I still haven't figured out what a lorry is.
Oh, a lorry. A lorry is a semi, like a tractor trailer.
Gotcha. Because at first I thought it was like a bus or something.
No. A lorry is a long haul truck. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Something that's got like the truck and then the trailer on the back of it. That is a lorry. Optimus Prime would be a lorry.
I feel like you lose something there when you call him a lorry.
It's interesting. That's something I probably should have picked up on. I don't know how many times we've definitely said that. I do try, but yeah, that one may slip by me. I'll have to pick up my Britishisms for the rest of the world, a guide for the rest of us.
Britishisms 101.
That's right.
Alrighty. Now, Ian, before we get out of here, I do have one favor for you, just because I love it, and it's just a little request. So just to make me happy before we get out of here. And I know it's about midnight where you are now. But,
oh wow, this too.
I need you to hit that mistake button.
All right.
I just got to hear it.
Let's do. Let me say something here. That would be a mistake. Let me say that. I don't know. The best thing you can do in order to build personal finances: buy lottery tickets.
There's a mistake. I think I made.
Oh Lord.
We're very lucky. That's the TV show Survivor. Lex Vandenberg. That's his. He was in Survivor Africa season 3. That's his band, and he actually gave us permission to use that soundbite, which is insane. We've been very fortunate over the. I can't say years because we're not that yet, but we are coming up on almost 18 months. So. Yeah, gotta love the mistake
sound effect.
Is it? Yeah, I do. We do have a few of them ready to go. I'm currently a fan of our sticker worthy button, but there's a few other ones as the time and the mood strikes, which will be determined, so to speak.
Alrighty, Ian. Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Best film ever. Everything he's ever mentioned that has a link that which you could look up is going to be listed in the description below. So if there's anything you want to track down except for who Ian is, because as you know, Ian on Best Film Ever is just his, Batman, his Clark Kent. Oh, yeah. I got that one backwards. It's a secret identity. We can't tell you who he is.
Or maybe
like you don't know who I am.
Maybe Ian's who I really am, and my day to day is my cover.
Oh no! Now you're gonna make me go into the Kill Bill speech.
Would you believe I've never seen Kill Bill? So there we go.
Really?
What we should do is an episode once at some point. I know you're trying to do your outro. I'm terribly sorry for this. Is what I should do is we should do an episode or a roundtable on films we're ashamed we haven't seen, because everybody's got these like blind spots. You're like, I really hope people don't know, but I haven't seen Avatar or Last of the Mohicans or Schindler's List. And you go, what do you mean you haven't seen? How can you do this if you haven't seen Schindler? I know. So
I know what my next mailbag question is going to be.
There we go, Harry. It's always good. It's always when you're knocking off. I finally saw Philadelphia, and I'm really glad I did. I saw Philadelphia, Green Mile, a couple of the big ones that I hadn't, that I'm really surprised I hadn't made time for, and glad I've seen them now. So these things happen. But anyway, I terribly sorry I interrupted your outro there.
Nah, it's all good. Look. Everyone knows what they're getting into. Everyone who is a BFE listener knows this is just how it works. 2 hours. That's par for the course. That's just how we do it around here.
It is. That's called a quick day.
There we go. Just in and out, especially at midnight UK time.
yeah, it is that. That's okay. I got another week of summer vacation to have to go back.
Well, there we go. All right. So for everyone who's been listening, thank you so much for making it this far into the episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have another excuse for me to bring Ian on the show, please tweet that over to me at Main Street Money or send me an email, and I'll find some kind of film and money excuse to get him on here. Ian, thank you so much for coming back. I know I said it before, but you know what? I'm doing it again.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
All righty, guys. You guys have a good one, and I will see you all next week.